Millionaire CEO spilled coffee on a young woman. What she did next silenced the entire coffee shop. Have you ever wondered if a single moment of grace could change your entire life? In a crowded coffee shop on a rainy Tuesday morning, a millionaire CEO accidentally spilled his expensive latte all over a young mother's uniform. What she did next didn't just silence the entire coffee shop, it changed both their lives forever. This is a story about dignity, sacrifice, and the unexpected miracles that happen when we choose kindness over anger. Stay with me, because what unfolds will touch your heart in ways you never expected. The alarm clock screamed at 5:15 in the morning, just like it did every single day. Emma Hayes reached across the small nightstand in her cramped studio apartment and silenced it with a practiced hand. She lay there for just a moment, staring at the water-stained ceiling, gathering the strength to face another day. In the twin bed across the room, her 8-year-old son Daniel slept peacefully, his small chest rising and falling with each breath. His worn stuffed rabbit was tucked under his arm, a gift from his grandmother before she passed away 3 years ago. Emma watched him sleep, and despite the exhaustion that seemed to live in her bones these days, she smiled. He was her reason for everything. Quietly, so as not to wake him, Emma slipped out of bed. The November chill made her shiver as her feet touched the cold linoleum floor. She couldn't afford to turn the heat up any higher than absolutely necessary. Every dollar counted. Every penny mattered. In the tiny bathroom, she studied her reflection in the mirror. At 34, she looked older than her years. The lines around her eyes told stories of sleepless nights and endless worry. Her hands, once soft, were now rough from years of cleaning, serving, and working. But her eyes still held determination. She splashed cold water on her face and got ready for her morning shift. Emma worked 2 jobs. From 6 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, she cleaned offices in the financial district downtown. Then, after a quick break to pick Daniel up from school and help him with homework, she worked as a waitress at a diner from 6 in the evening until midnight, 7 days a week. No breaks, no vacations. Because that's what it took to keep a roof over their heads and food on the table. She pulled on her cleaning service uniform, a simple gray polo shirt and black pants. The shirt had a small stain near the hem that wouldn't come out no matter how many times she washed it. She tried to hide it with a safety pin, but she knew it was still visible. It was just one more thing that marked her as someone struggling, someone barely holding on. Before leaving, Emma knelt beside Daniel's bed and gently brushed the hair from his forehead. "I love you, sweetheart," she whispered. "Mrs. Chen will be here at 7 to get you ready for school. Be good for her, okay?" Daniel stirred slightly but didn't wake. The elderly neighbor, Mrs. Preston, slightly. Chen was a blessing. She watched Daniel in the mornings for almost nothing, understanding Emma's situation in a way that made Emma's eyes water with gratitude whenever she thought about it. Emma grabbed her worn purse and the thermos of instant coffee she'd made the night before. Real coffee was a luxury she couldn't afford. She took the bus to work, another cost-saving measure, even though it added an extra 40 minutes to her commute each way. The bus was crowded with other early morning workers, people like her, tired and worn, but pushing forward because that's what life demanded. Emma found a seat near the back and leaned her head against the cold window, watching the city wake up. Lights flickered on in apartment windows. Shop owners unlocked their doors. Joggers ran past with expensive headphones and designer running shoes. It was a different world, one that existed parallel to hers but never quite touching. By 7:30, Emma had clocked in and was working her way through her list of offices. She moved methodically, trash bins, dusting, vacuuming, bathroom cleaning. The work was invisible. The people who would arrive at 9 o'clock in their pressed suits and polished shoes would never think about who cleaned their desks, who made their offices shine. Emma had made peace with that invisibility. It was honest work, and honest work had its own dignity. At 1:30, her morning shift ended. Emma had 30 minutes before she needed to catch the bus to Daniel's school. She'd learned to time everything precisely. But today, she decided to do something different, something small but for her significant. There was a coffee shop across the street from her last office building. Not just any coffee shop, a fancy one with leather chairs and soft music and coffee that cost more than her hourly wage. Emma had walked past it hundreds of times, always looking through the windows at the people inside, people who could afford $6 lattes without thinking twice. Today, For reasons she couldn't quite explain, Emma decided to go inside. She had exactly $4.50 in her purse money she'd been saving from her tips. She'd been planning to buy Daniel a new set of paintbrushes for his art class. He loved painting more than anything in the world, and his current brushes were down to just a few bristles. But today, just this once, Emma wanted to feel normal. She wanted to sit in a nice coffee shop and drink real coffee like everyone else. The bell chimed softly as she pushed open the heavy glass door. The warmth hit her immediately, along with a rich smell of fresh ground coffee beans. The interior was everything she'd imagined. Soft lighting, comfortable seating, quiet conversations. Classical music played softly in the background. Emma approached the counter, suddenly very aware of her stained uniform, her worn shoes, her tired appearance. The barista, a young woman with perfect makeup and a practiced smile, looked at her expectantly. "Just a small coffee, please," Emma said softly. "Regular coffee, black." "That'll be $3.50, the barista said. Emma handed over her carefully counted bills and coins. The barista gave her a receipt and told her the coffee would be ready at the pickup counter. Emma moved to the side, clutching her receipt, feeling out of place but also strangely peaceful. That's when it happened. A man in an expensive suit was walking quickly toward the door, his attention on his phone, his leather briefcase in one hand and a large coffee in the other. He was moving with the confidence of someone who never had to watch where he was going, someone for whom the world naturally made way. He didn't see Emma standing near the pickup counter. She didn't see him approaching. They collided. The coffee, a grande caramel macchiato with extra foam. The barista would later recall, flew from his hand and splashed across Emma's uniform. The hot liquid soaked through the gray fabric immediately, burning her skin underneath. She gasped and stepped back, looking down at the spreading brown stain across her chest and stomach. The entire coffee shop went silent. The man, tall, perhaps in his late 40s, with silver-touched hair and a watch that probably cost more than Emma's yearly rent, stood frozen, looking at what he'd done. Emma looked up at him, then down at her uniform. This was her only work uniform. She had another shift at the diner tonight, and now it was ruined. She'd have to go home, change, use precious time she didn't have. The stain might not come out. She might have to buy a new uniform. Money she absolutely didn't have. She felt the familiar sting of tears building behind her eyes. Not here, she told herself. Not now. Don't cry in front of all these people. The man opened his mouth to speak, his expression a mixture of shock and irritation. "You should watch where you're," he began. But Emma interrupted him, her voice quiet but steady. "I'm sorry," she said. "I should have been paying more attention. Are you okay? Did any of the coffee get on your suit?" The coffee shop remained silent. Everyone was watching. The man's mouth actually fell open slightly. He stared at Emma as if she'd spoken a foreign language. "Hi, what?" he said. Emma grabbed some napkins from the nearby dispenser and handed them to him. "Your suit," she said. "Is it stained? I know coffee stains are hard to get out." The man looked down at his immaculate suit, then back at Emma, whose entire uniform was soaked with his coffee. She was the one who should be angry. She was the one who'd been burned and stained and inconvenienced. And yet here she was, apologizing to him, concerned about his suit. "No," he said slowly. "No, I'm fine, but your uniform is ruined. It's okay," Emma said, dabbing at the stain with more napkins even though she knew it was hopeless. "Accidents happen. Don't worry about it." Richard Montgomery stood in that coffee shop, napkins forgotten in his hand, watching the woman with the stained uniform hurry toward the restroom. He couldn't remember the last time someone had surprised him like this. Actually, he couldn't remember the last time anyone had surprised him at all. Richard Montgomery wasn't just wealthy, he was extremely wealthy. He built his commercial real estate company from the ground up over the past 20 years, and it was now worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He had homes in 3 cities, drove a car that cost more than most people's houses, and wore suits custom-tailored in London. He was used to people being careful around him, deferential, even frightened of making mistakes in his presence. And yet this woman, this tired-looking woman in a stained uniform, had apologized to him. She'd collided with him because he was staring at his phone instead of watching where he was going. He'd spilled his coffee all over her, and she had apologized to him. The barista approached him hesitantly. "Mr. Montgomery, I'm so sorry about that. Would you like me to make you another coffee? On the house, of course." Richard waved her away absently. He was still processing what had just happened. A young boy suddenly appeared at his side, having come through the coffee shop door. He couldn't have been more than 8 years old, with the same warm brown eyes as the woman who'd just left. The boy looked up at Richard with concern. "Mister, did you spill your coffee on my mom?" the boy asked. Richard looked down at him. Yes, I did. I wasn't watching where I was going." The boy nodded seriously. "My mom says accidents happen, and we should always be kind about them. She says getting angry doesn't change what already happened. It just makes everything worse." Richard found himself speechless for the second time in as many minutes. The boy pulled a small, slightly crumpled drawing from his backpack. "This is for you," the boy said, holding it out. "My mom teaches me that when someone is having a bad day, a kind gesture can help. You look like maybe you're having a bad day if you weren't watching where you were going." Richard took the drawing. It was done in crayon, a simple picture of a sunshine and some flowers with the words, "Have a good day," written in a child's careful handwriting. "I'm Daniel," the boy said. "What's your name?" "Richard," he said quietly. "Richard Montgomery." "Well, Mr. Richard, I hope your day gets better. My mom is the best person in the whole world, so don't feel too bad about the coffee. She won't be mad." Emma emerged from the restroom at that moment, the stain on her uniform still visible but slightly less wet. Her eyes widened when she saw Daniel. "Daniel, what are you doing here?" "You're supposed to be with Mrs. Chen. She had to leave early for a doctor's appointment, so she brought me here. She saw you through the window." The boy looked up at his mother with pure adoration. "I gave the man one of my pictures, Mom. He seemed sad about the coffee." Emma's cheeks flushed slightly. "Daniel, I'm sure this gentleman doesn't need—" "Please," Richard interrupted. "He's a very thoughtful young man, and he's right. I should apologize properly. I wasn't paying attention, and I ruined your uniform. Please let me pay for the dry cleaning, or better yet, let me buy you a replacement." Emma shook her head. "That's not necessary, really. I have another one at home." This was a lie, and Richard suspected it was a lie, but he didn't press. "Then at least let me buy you your coffee, the one you ordered before all this happened." Emma looked uncomfortable, but Daniel tugged at her hand. "Mom, you came here to get coffee. You should get your coffee." Richard saw her hesitate, saw the internal struggle, pride versus practicality. He recognized it because he once had to make similar calculations many years ago, before his success. "All right," Emma said finally. "Thank you. That's very kind." Richard ordered her a small coffee, the same one she'd originally requested, and on impulse added a hot chocolate for Daniel. When Emma tried to protest, he simply said, "Please, it's the least I can do." They sat together for just a few minutes before Emma said they needed to catch their bus. But in those few minutes, Richard learned more than he'd expected. He learned that Daniel was in 3rd grade and loved art class more than anything. He learned that Emma worked 2 jobs. He learned that they took the bus everywhere. He learned from Daniel's innocent chatter that they lived in a small apartment and that sometimes they had adventure dinners where they pretended eating peanut butter sandwiches was exciting. Richard heard what Daniel was really saying. They were struggling. But he also heard something else in Emma's quiet corrections and gentle redirections of Daniel's chatter. He heard dignity. He heard pride. He heard a mother who was doing everything in her power to give her son a good life, even when she had almost nothing to work with. As they left, Daniel waving goodbye enthusiastically and Emma thanking him quietly one more time, Richard sat alone at the table. He looked down at the crayon drawing the boy had given him. Richard Montgomery hadn't built a business empire by being unobservant. He'd succeeded because he could see potential where others saw nothing. He could recognize value that wasn't immediately obvious. And as he sat there in that coffee shop holding a child's drawing, he recognized something he hadn't felt in a very long time. He felt moved. That evening, Richard did something he almost never did. Instead of working late at his office, reviewing contracts and planning acquisitions, he sat in his penthouse apartment and thought about Emma and Daniel. He thought about the grace with which she'd handled an embarrassing situation. He thought about her son's kindness. He thought about how, despite obviously struggling, neither of them had seemed bitter or defeated. Richard pulled out his phone and made a call to his assistant. "Jennifer, I need you to do something for me tomorrow morning, discreetly." He described Emma her cleaning service uniform, the coffee shop where they'd met, the approximate time she'd been there. It wasn't hard for Jennifer, who was nothing if not efficient, to figure out which cleaning service she worked for. By the next afternoon, Richard knew Emma's full name, her work history, and a few other basic facts. Emma Hayes, single mother, no family support, working 2 jobs, never missed a day of work, always on time, excellent performance reviews from both employers despite obviously exhausting circumstances. Richard sat back in his leather office chair and looked out over the city skyline. He'd been thinking about expanding his company's internal operations, bringing some outsourced services in-house. It was a business decision he'd been considering for months, but now he had another reason to consider it. He wondered if Emma Hayes knew that a simple act of grace, a moment of kindness when anger would have been justified, had caught the attention of someone who could change her life. Probably not, he thought. People like Emma didn't think that way. They just did what was right and kept moving forward, day after day, without expecting rewards or recognition. Richard made a decision. He picked up his phone and called Jennifer again. "Cancel my meetings tomorrow afternoon," he said. "I need to make a visit." Emma sat at her small kitchen table at 1 o'clock in the morning, a calculator and a stack of bills spread out before her. Daniel was asleep, his gentle breathing the only sound in the quiet apartment besides the occasional hum of the refrigerator. The numbers weren't adding up. They never added up, but tonight they were worse than usual. The rent was due in 5 days. She had enough for that barely, but it would leave almost nothing for the next 2 weeks. The electric bill was higher than usual because of the cold weather. She'd been keeping the heat low, but even low was expensive. Daniel needed new shoes. His current pair had a hole in the sole that she'd been trying to patch with cardboard inserts, but it wouldn't last much longer. And then there was the eviction notice. Emma picked up the letter that had arrived 3 days ago. Her landlord was selling the building. All tenants had to be out within 60 days. 60 days to find a new apartment, come up with first month's rent, last month's rent, and a security deposit. In this city, that could easily be $4,000 or $5,000. She didn't have $4,000 or $5,000. She didn't even have $400 or $500 in savings. Emma put her head in her hands. She was so tired, not just physically tired from working 2 jobs and getting 5 hours of sleep a night. She was soul tired, heart tired, tired of the constant worry, the endless calculating, the feeling that no matter how hard she worked, she was always one unexpected expense away from complete disaster. The stained uniform hung over the back of a chair, drying after she'd tried to wash it for the 4th time. The stain had faded a bit, but it was still clearly visible. She'd have to wear it anyway. She didn't have a choice. Emma's thoughts drifted back to that morning at the coffee shop, to the man who'd spilled his coffee on her, Richard Montgomery. She'd recognized him after they'd left, after she'd Googled his name on her phone out of curiosity. He was famous in the business world, apparently, a self-made millionaire. Some articles said he might even be a billionaire. She'd been standing 3 feet away from more wealth than she could even imagine, and he'd been kind to her. That surprise had stayed with her all day. In her experience, wealthy people weren't usually kind to people like her. They were usually the ones who complained about the service, who didn't tip well, who treated her like she was invisible, or worse, like she was less than human. But Richard Montgomery had been different, and his interaction with Daniel had been genuinely warm. She'd seen it in his eyes. He'd really listened to her son, really seen him as a person, not just an interruption to his day. It had been such a small thing, really. A coffee, a hot chocolate, a few minutes of conversation. But it had meant more to Emma than he could possibly know. For just those few minutes, she'd felt seen. She'd felt human. She'd felt like maybe the universe wasn't entirely indifferent to her struggle. Emma sighed and turned back to her bills. Dreams were nice, but they didn't pay the rent. Over the next 2 weeks, life continued its relentless pace. Emma worked, slept a few hours, worked again. She smiled at Daniel, helped him with his homework, listened to him chatter about his art class and the painting competition his school was having next month. The winner would get their artwork displayed in the city's children's museum and a $50 gift certificate to the art supply store. Daniel talked about that competition constantly. He'd been working on his painting for weeks, a landscape with mountains and a river and a sky full of stars. He worked on it every evening at the kitchen table while Emma prepared their simple dinner. "Mom, do you think my painting is good enough to win?" he asked one night. Emma looked at his painting. It was good, really good. Daniel had natural talent, the kind that made her heart ache because she couldn't afford proper lessons, couldn't buy him quality supplies, couldn't nurture his gift the way it deserved to be nurtured. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," she said honestly. "You should be very proud of it. If I win the $50, I'm going to buy you something nice," Daniel said seriously. "Maybe a new dress. You never have anything new." Emma's throat tightened. "Baby, if you win, that money is for you, for art supplies you need." "But I want to get you something," Daniel insisted. "You work so hard, Mom. You should have nice things too." Emma knelt down and pulled her son into a hug, hiding her tears in his hair. How had she raised such a thoughtful child? How did he stay so kind, so generous, when they had so little? "You're my nice thing," she whispered. "You're the best thing I could ever have." The following week brought new challenges. Emma's car, an ancient sedan that broke down more often than it ran, finally died completely. The repair would cost $800. She didn't have $800. She couldn't borrow $800. So now she was taking the bus for both jobs, adding an extra hour and a half to her already exhausting days. Then Daniel got sick. Just a cold, but it meant Emma had to miss a shift at the diner to stay home with him. Missing a shift meant losing both the hourly wage and the tips. She calculated the loss, approximately $85. $85 she desperately needed. She held Daniel as he slept fitfully, his small body hot with fever, and she prayed. Emma had been praying a lot lately. She wasn't even sure what she believed anymore, whether anyone was listening, but she prayed anyway, because it was all she had left. "Please," she whispered into the darkness. "Please, just give me a break, just one small break. I'm trying so hard. I just need a little help." The next morning, Daniel's fever broke. He was weak but smiling. "Did you stay with me all night, Mom?" "Of course I did, sweetheart. You must be tired. You should rest today." Emma smiled and kissed his forehead. "I'm fine, baby. I'm always fine." But she wasn't fine. She was falling apart. And she was running out of time to find a new apartment, running out of money to pay for anything, running out of strength to keep going. That afternoon, while Daniel was at school, Emma did something she'd sworn she'd never do. She went to a social services office to ask about assistance programs. The waiting room was crowded and depressing. Emma sat there for 3 hours watching other tired, desperate people wait for their turn, wait for help, wait for someone to tell them it would be okay. When she finally got to speak with a caseworker, the woman was kind but overwhelmed. "You make just barely too much to qualify for most programs," she explained, looking at Emma's paperwork. "2 jobs put you above the income threshold." "But I can barely survive," Emma said quietly. "I work 80 hours a week and I can't pay my bills." "I understand," the caseworker said, and she sounded like she genuinely did. "The system isn't designed well. You're in what we call the gap. You make too much for assistance, but not enough to actually live on. I can put you on a waiting list for housing assistance, but the wait is usually 18 to 24 months. Emma left that office feeling more hopeless than when she'd arrived. The system couldn't help her. No one could help her. She was on her own, just like she'd always been. That night, as she tucked Daniel into bed, he looked up at her with his big, trusting eyes. "Mom, are we going to be okay?" Emma smoothed his hair back. "Of course we are, baby. We always are." "I heard you crying in the bathroom yesterday," Daniel said softly. "Are you sad?" Emma's heart broke a little. She'd thought she'd been quiet. "Sometimes grown-ups cry when they're tired," she said. "It doesn't mean I'm not happy. You make me happy every single day. I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart, more than anything in the world." After Daniel fell asleep, Emma went back to her kitchen table, to her bills and her calculator, and her impossible situation. She put her head down on her arms and let herself cry, really cry, the kind of crying that came from a place of complete exhaustion and fear and desperate hope that somehow, some way, things would get better. She didn't know that the next day would change everything. She didn't know that her moment of grace in a coffee shop had set events in motion that she couldn't even imagine. She didn't know that sometimes prayers are answered in the most unexpected ways. All she knew was that tomorrow she'd wake up and keep going, because that's what mothers do. They keep going no matter what, for the sake of their children. Emma was halfway through her morning cleaning shift when her supervisor approached her. "Emma, someone's here to see you," Ms. Patterson said. She looked confused. "He says it's important. He's waiting in the lobby." Emma's heart jumped. Had something happened to Daniel? Was he sick at school? "Who is it?" "He said his name is Richard Montgomery. Do you know him?" Emma's mind raced. Richard Montgomery, the man from the coffee shop. Why would he be here? How did he even know where she worked? "Yes, I met him briefly. I'll come down." Emma removed her cleaning gloves and straightened her uniform, the same one with the coffee stain that wouldn't fully come out. She took the elevator down to the lobby, her mind spinning with possibilities, none of them making sense. Richard Montgomery stood near the windows, looking out of place in his expensive suit in the plain office building lobby. He turned when he heard her approach, and his expression was serious but not unkind. "Ms. Hayes," he said, "thank you for seeing me. I apologize for showing up at your workplace unannounced." "Is everything okay?" Emma asked, bewildered. "Yes, everything's fine. I was wondering if you might have a few minutes to talk. Perhaps we could sit?" He gestured to the lobby seating area. Emma glanced back toward the elevators. "I'm working. I don't really have time for." "I've already spoken with your supervisor. She's given you permission to take a break. This won't take long, I promise." More confused than ever, Emma sat down in one of the lobby chairs. Richard sat across from her, leaning forward with his hands clasped. "I'm going to be direct with you, Miss Hayes, because I sense you appreciate directness. I've been thinking about our encounter at the coffee shop, about you and your son." Emma felt her cheeks flush. "Mr. Montgomery, if this is about the coffee, I told you." "It's not about the coffee," he interrupted gently. "It's about something else. That morning your son gave me a drawing. Do you remember?" "Yes, I remember. Daniel is very generous that way. I hope he didn't bother you." "He didn't bother me at all. In fact, he reminded me of something I'd forgotten. He reminded me what real kindness looks like, what grace under pressure looks like." Richard paused. "I don't know if you realize this, but most people in your situation that morning would have been angry, justifiably angry. I ruined your uniform, I wasn't paying attention, and I'm obviously not struggling financially. Most people would have demanded compensation, or been rude, or at the very least, been obviously resentful." "I don't see the point in anger when it's already done," Emma said quietly. "Exactly," Richard said. "And that quality, that grace, is rare. Rarer than you might think. I've met thousands of people in my business career, Miss Hayes. I've worked with some of the most educated, successful people in the world, and I can tell you honestly that very few of them would have handled that situation with as much dignity as you did." Emma didn't know what to say. She sat there uncomfortable with the praise, unsure where this conversation was going. "I learned some things about you," Richard continued. "I hope you'll forgive the intrusion, but I asked a few questions. I learned you work 2 jobs. I learned you're a single mother. I learned that despite obviously difficult circumstances, you have perfect attendance at both jobs, excellent performance reviews, and a reputation for reliability that's remarkable." Emma felt a chill. "Mr. Montgomery, I don't understand why you're telling me this." "I'm telling you this because I'm impressed, and because I'd like to offer you an opportunity." "An opportunity?" Richard leaned back. "My company has been considering bringing our building services in-house, creating an internal facilities management department rather than outsourcing to cleaning services. We'd need someone to manage that department, someone reliable, organized, and honest, someone who understands the work from the ground up." Emma's heart started pounding. Are you offering me a job?" "I'm offering you an interview," Richard corrected. "I'm a businessman, Ms. Hayes, not a charity. I don't make hiring decisions based on sentiment, but I am offering you a chance to interview for a position that would pay significantly more than you're making now, with health insurance, vacation time, and normal hours, regular business hours, 5 days a week." Emma felt dizzy. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. "I don't have management experience," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You have something better. You have work ethic, integrity, and the ability to treat people with respect, regardless of their status. Those things can't be taught. Management skills can be learned. Richard pulled a business card from his pocket and handed it to her. Think about it. If you're interested, call my assistant and set up an interview. No pressure, no obligation, just a chance. Emma took the card with trembling fingers. Why are you doing this? Richard was quiet for a moment. 25 years ago, I was broke. Not just poor, completely broke. I was sleeping in my car and washing up in gas station bathrooms. I had a business idea, but no way to make it happen. And then someone gave me a chance. Someone saw something in me and offered me an opportunity I didn't think I deserved. He looked directly at Emma. That person changed my life. They didn't give me anything I didn't earn. They just opened the door. What I did with that opportunity was up to me. I've been looking for a way to pay that forward ever since. This isn't charity, Mrs. Hayes. This is me opening a door. What you do with the opportunity is entirely up to you. Emma couldn't speak. Tears were building in her eyes and she fought them back. Also, Richard added, reaching into his briefcase, I learned that your son is quite the artist. There's a competition at his school. Emma nodded, not trusting her voice. I happen to sit on the board of the Children's Museum. I'd love to see his work. No promises, you understand. The competition is judged fairly, but I wanted you to know that I've made a small donation to the museum in Daniel's name, specifically to support the youth art program. He handed her an envelope. Emma opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a receipt showing a donation of $5,000 to the Children's Museum's youth art program, made in Daniel Hayes' name. Mr. Montgomery, I can't. This is too much. It's not for you, Richard said gently. It's for the program. All children should have access to art education, regardless of their family's financial situation. Your son's kindness reminded me of that. Consider it my way of saying thank you to him. Emma couldn't hold back the tears anymore. They spilled down her cheeks as she clutched the receipt. I don't know what to say, she whispered. You don't have to say anything. Just think about the job interview. And Ms. Hayes? Richard stood up. You're doing an amazing job with your son. Whatever else is happening in your life, you should know that. That kind of kindness and thoughtfulness doesn't happen by accident. It comes from having an extraordinary parent. He left then, walking out of the lobby and leaving Emma sitting there crying quietly, holding a business card and a donation receipt, and a hope she was almost afraid to feel. Her supervisor found her 10 minutes later, still sitting in the lobby, staring at the business card. Emma, are you all right? Emma looked up, her face still wet with tears, but she was smiling, really smiling, for the first time in months. Yes, she said. I think I might actually be all right. Emma stood outside the gleaming glass tower that housed Montgomery Real Estate Development, her hands smoothing down the front of her dress for the 10th time. It wasn't a new dress. She'd found it at a thrift store 3 days ago for $12, but it was professional and clean, and made her feel more confident than she'd felt in years. The interview was in 15 minutes. Emma had debated for 3 days whether to even call Richard's assistant. Part of her had been convinced it was all some kind of elaborate joke or misunderstanding. People like Richard Montgomery didn't offer people like her life-changing opportunities. That wasn't how the world worked. But she'd called anyway. Because what did she have to lose? And now here she was, about to interview for a position that could change everything. The lobby was intimidating. All marble floors and modern art and well-dressed people moving with purpose. Emma gave her name to the receptionist, who smiled professionally and directed her to the 11th floor. The elevator ride felt like it took forever. Emma watched the numbers climb and tried to calm her racing heart. She prepared for this interview as thoroughly as she could, staying up late reviewing management articles online at the library, practicing answers to common interview questions. But she still felt desperately out of her depth. The elevator doors opened to reveal another reception area, this one with Montgomery Real Estate Development spelled out in silver letters on the wall behind the desk. Emma Hayes, a polished woman in her 30s, approached with an extended hand. I'm Jennifer Chen, Mr. Montgomery's assistant. Thank you for coming in today. Emma shook her hand, grateful that her own wasn't visibly trembling. Thank you for having me. Mr. Montgomery is just finishing up a call. He asked me to get you settled. Can I get you some water? Coffee? Water would be wonderful, thank you. Jennifer led her to a small conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Emma sat down, trying not to stare at the view. You could see everything from up here, the whole city spreading out in every direction, the river cutting through downtown, the mountains in the distance. It was the same city she lived in, but from up here, it looked completely different, beautiful, full of possibility. Jennifer returned with water and a folder. Mr. Montgomery wanted me to give you this before the interview. It's a description of the position, the salary range, and the benefits package. Just so you know what we're discussing. Emma opened the folder with shaking hands. Her eyes went immediately to the salary range, $55,000 to $65,000 per year. Emma had to read it 3 times to make sure she wasn't misunderstanding. She currently made, between both her jobs, about $28,000 a year. This position would more than double her income. More than double it. The benefits section listed health insurance, dental, vision, 3 weeks of paid vacation, sick days, retirement matching. Emma put a hand over her mouth. This couldn't be real. The door opened and Richard Montgomery entered, and Emma stood up quickly. "Ms. Hayes," he said warmly, shaking her hand. "Thank you for coming in. Please, sit down." He sat across from her, and somehow, his presence made Emma feel calmer rather than more nervous. He had that effect of confidence that was reassuring rather than intimidating. "I assume Jennifer gave you the position description?" "Yes, sir." "Then you know what we're looking for. I want to be very clear about something, Miss Hayes. This interview is real. This position is real. I'm not doing you a favor. I'm looking for the right person to manage our facilities operations. And I believe you might be that person. But I need to know that you can handle it." For the next hour, they talked. Richard asked her questions about problem solving, about handling difficult situations, about managing people. Emma answered honestly, drawing on her experiences from years of working multiple jobs, dealing with difficult customers, managing her own household budget, coordinating schedules. At one point, Richard asked her, "What's the hardest situation you've ever had to manage?" Emma thought about that. "Every day for the last 3 years, she said finally. "Managing 2 jobs, raising my son alone, keeping everything together when I barely had enough money to survive, planning every dollar, every hour, every decision, making sure my son never felt poor even though we were, making sure he grew up knowing he was loved and valued even when I was exhausted and scared. That's been the hardest management challenge I've ever faced." Richard nodded slowly. "And you succeeded at it. Your son is kind, thoughtful, creative, happy. That tells me everything I need to know about your ability to manage complex situations with limited resources." They talked about the specific responsibilities of the position. Emma would oversee a team of 15 people who maintained all of Montgomery's properties. She'd be responsible for scheduling, quality control, vendor relationships, and budget management. "I know you can do this," Richard said, "but I need to know if you believe you can do this." Emma looked at him directly. "Mr. Montgomery, I've spent the last 3 years doing what everyone told me was impossible, supporting myself and my son on minimum wage jobs, keeping a roof over our heads when the math said I couldn't, making sure my son had food, clothes, and school supplies when there wasn't enough money for any of it. I found a way because I had to find a way. If you give me this opportunity, I'll find a way to succeed at it too. Not because I'm special, but because when you've lived on the edge the way I have, you learn to fight for every inch, and I'll fight to make sure I'm the best employee you've ever had." Richard smiled. "You're hired." Emma blinked. What?" "You're hired. The position is yours if you want it. Starting salary will be $60,000. You can start in 2 weeks. I assume you'll need to give notice at your current positions." Emma couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what was happening. Yes, 2 weeks' notice. But Mr. Montgomery, don't you need to check references? Interview other candidates?" I've already checked your references. Your current employers gave you glowing recommendations, and I don't need to interview other candidates. I'm good at reading people, Miss Hayes. I've built a successful company on that skill, and everything I see in you tells me you're exactly who I need for this position." Emma realized she was crying again. She tried to stop, embarrassed, but Richard simply handed her a tissue. "It's a big change," he said kindly. It's okay to be emotional. I don't know how to thank you, Emma said through her tears. Thank me by being excellent at this job. Thank me by proving that my instinct about you was correct. He stood up and extended his hand. Welcome to Montgomery Real Estate Development, Emma. Emma shook his hand, still crying, still unable to fully believe this was happening. Jennifer came in to handle the paperwork, tax forms, insurance elections, direct deposit information. Emma's hands shook as she filled everything out. She was going to have health insurance, real health insurance. Daniel could go to the doctor when he was sick without her having to choose between his health and paying the electric bill. She'd have paid vacation. She could take Daniel somewhere, maybe just a weekend trip to the mountains, but somewhere. They could go somewhere together. As Emma left the building 2 hours later, she stood on the sidewalk and looked up at the gleaming tower. Somewhere up there, in an office on the 11th floor, Richard Montgomery had just changed her life. She pulled out her phone and called Daniel's school. This is Emma Hayes, Daniel Hayes' mother. Could you give him a message for me? Could you tell him that when he comes home today, we're going to celebrate? Tell him everything's going to be okay now. Everything's going to be just fine. That evening, Emma picked Daniel up from school wearing the biggest smile he'd seen in months. Mom, what happened? Mrs. Bendadribble. Chen said you called and that we're celebrating. Emma knelt down and hugged him tight. Remember the man from the coffee shop? The one you gave your drawing to? Mr. Richard. Yes, Mr. Richard. He offered me a new job, Daniel. A really good job. 1 job instead of 2. Better pay and normal hours. I'll be home with you every evening. We're going to be okay, sweetheart. We're really going to be okay. Daniel hugged her back fiercely. I knew it, Mom. I knew something good would happen. You work so hard. You deserve good things. They went to their favorite place for dinner, a small pizza place where a personal pizza and a soda cost $8. Before, that had been a once-a-month treat they could barely afford. But today, Emma didn't care. Today, she ordered pizza for both of them, and breadsticks, too. As they ate, Daniel chattering excitedly about his day and his painting, and how he couldn't wait for Emma to be home more. Emma felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope. Real, solid, believable hope. The future, which had always seemed like something to survive, suddenly seemed like something to look forward to. 3 months later, Emma stood in the Children's Museum gallery, looking at her son's painting hanging on the wall. Not just any wall, the featured wall, the one you saw immediately when you walked into the youth art exhibition. Daniel's landscape painting, with its mountains and river and stars, had won first place in the school competition. And now it hung here, in a real museum, with a small plaque underneath that read, Starlight Journey by Daniel Hayes, age 8. Daniel stood beside her, trying to look calm but practically vibrating with excitement. He wore new clothes, not expensive but new, purchased without Emma having to calculate exactly how it would impact their grocery budget. Mom, people are looking at my painting, he whispered. Real people in a real museum are looking at something I made. Emma put her arm around him. That's because you're talented, sweetheart. You have a real gift. Do you think Mr. Richard will come? He said he would. I'm sure he will, Emma said, though she wasn't entirely sure. Richard was a busy man, and while he'd been nothing but supportive since she'd started working at his company, she didn't expect him to attend every event in their lives. But 10 minutes later, Richard Montgomery walked into the gallery, and Daniel's face lit up like sunshine. Mr. Richard. Daniel ran to him, then skidded to a stop, remembering his manners. Hello, Mr. Montgomery. Thank you for coming. Richard laughed. Hello, Daniel. And please, when we're not at the office, you can call me Richard. Is that your painting over there? Yes. Do you want to see it up close? Richard let Daniel lead him to the painting, and Emma watched them together, this wealthy businessman and her 8-year-old son, talking seriously about art and color and technique. It still felt surreal sometimes, this new life they were building. The past 3 months had been transformative. Emma's new job had been challenging, learning the systems, managing the team, proving herself, but she'd thrown herself into it with everything she had. Her team respected her because she understood their work from the inside out, because she treated everyone with dignity, because she held them to high standards but supported them when they struggled. Richard had been a mentor, guiding her through the business aspects she didn't know, but always making it clear that he believed in her capability. He'd never made her feel like a charity case, or like she owed him something beyond excellent work. The apartment situation had resolved itself. With her new salary, Emma had been able to find a two-bedroom apartment in the safe neighborhood near Daniel's school. It wasn't luxury, but it had a real bedroom for Daniel, where he could spread out his art supplies. It had reliable heat and hot water. It felt like a palace compared to where they'd been living. Emma had health insurance now. When Daniel had gotten a bad ear infection last month, she'd taken him to the doctor without hesitation, without calculating the cost, without choosing between his health and paying bills. That simple freedom still brought tears to her eyes when she thought about it. She'd started putting money in savings, actual savings, money that wasn't already designated for bills. It wasn't much yet, just $50 a week, but it was growing. She had a safety net now, small but real. "He's wonderful," Richard said, joining Emma while Daniel talked to other children near his painting. "You should be very proud." "I am," Emma said, "every single day." "How are you adjusting to the new position?" "Be honest. It's challenging," Emma admitted. "There's a lot I'm still learning. But I love it, Richard. I actually love my job. I never thought I'd be able to say that. You're excelling at it. The team loves you. Our properties have never looked better, and you've already suggested 3 operational improvements that are saving us money." He paused. "I want to talk to you about something, actually. Not today, this day is about Daniel. But next week, let's have lunch. I'm considering expanding your role, giving you more responsibilities, and of course a corresponding salary increase." Emma looked at him in shock. "I've only been there 3 months. And in 3 months, you've proven yourself invaluable. But we'll discuss it next week. Today is for celebrating your son." After Richard moved on to look at other artwork, Emma stood there, overwhelmed again by how much had changed. 6 months ago, she'd been standing in a coffee shop, apologizing to a stranger for his mistake, wearing a stained uniform, wondering how she'd make rent. Now she was here, in a museum, watching her son's dreams come true, with a career that had a future, with stability and hope and possibilities. Later that evening, after they returned home and Daniel had finally gone to sleep still talking about his painting and the people who'd complimented it, Emma sat on her small balcony with a cup of tea. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. All the hard days, all the impossible choices, all the times she'd wanted to give up but couldn't because Daniel needed her. All the nights she'd cried at her kitchen table, wondering if it would ever get better. And she thought about that moment in the coffee shop, that split second when she'd had to choose. She could have been angry, could have made a scene, could have demanded Richard Montgomery acknowledge his mistake and make it right. Instead, she'd chosen grace. She'd chosen kindness. Not because she expected anything in return, but because that's who she was, who she'd always tried to be even when it was hard. That single choice, that moment of grace, had changed everything. Emma had learned something profound. Kindness isn't weakness. Grace under pressure isn't surrender. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is choose dignity when anger would be justified. Choose forgiveness when you'd be right to demand apologies. Choose to see the humanity in others even when they've wronged you. Because you never know who's watching. You never know what doors might open. You never know how a single moment of choosing your better self over your justified anger might change the trajectory of your entire life. Richard hadn't helped her because he felt guilty or because he owed her something. He'd helped her because her character, revealed in a moment of adversity, had shown him something worth investing in. Emma pulled out her phone and looked at the drawing Daniel had given Richard that day. She'd taken a picture of it before Daniel had given it away. Simple crayon flowers and sunshine, with the words, "Have a good day," written in a child's careful handwriting. Such a small gesture, such a pure expression of kindness from a child who had every reason to be bitter about his circumstances, but instead chose to spread joy. Emma realized that she taught Daniel, that she taught him that kindness matters, that how we treat people matters, that grace and dignity are choices we make regardless of our circumstances. And in teaching him those lessons, she'd saved herself. Because living those values, even when it was hard, even when it seemed pointless, had ultimately opened a door to a better life. She made a promise to herself then. Now that she had more money, more stability, more security, she would remember what it felt like to have nothing. She would remember the desperation, the fear, the exhaustion, and she would use that memory to treat others with the same grace she'd shown Richard, the same grace she hoped someone would show her if their positions were reversed. The next week at work, Emma started a program she'd been thinking about. She talked to Richard about it first, and he'd immediately supported it. They would offer entry-level positions in the facilities department to people who were struggling single parents, people re-entering the workforce, people who needed a chance. Emma would personally mentor them, help them develop skills, support them in building careers. "You're going to change lives," Richard said when she presented the program. "Someone changed mine," Emma replied. "It's only fair to pass it forward." 6 months later, Emma sat in on Daniel's parent-teacher conference. His teacher smiled warmly. "Daniel is thriving," she said. "His grades are excellent, but more than that, he's such a kind child. He's always helping other students, always saying encouraging things. Where does he learn that?" Emma felt her throat tighten with emotion. "He learns it from seeing that kindness matters, that how we treat people makes a difference. Well, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. The world needs more children like Daniel." That evening, Emma and Daniel cooked dinner together in their small but comfortable kitchen. As they ate, Daniel told her about his day, about his friends, about the new painting he was working on. "Mom," he said suddenly, "do you remember when we used to have adventure dinners with peanut butter sandwiches?" Emma laughed. "I remember." "I like those," Daniel said thoughtfully. "Not because of the sandwiches, but because you always made everything feel special. Even when things were hard, you made it feel like we were okay." Emma reached across the table and took his hand. "We were okay, sweetheart. We always were because we had each other. We're just more comfortable now. I know, but I want you to know that even when things were hard, I never felt poor. I just felt loved." Emma couldn't speak. She just squeezed his hand and blinked back tears. Later, she'd think about how that was the real miracle. Not the job or the apartment or the financial stability, though all of those things mattered. The real miracle was that through everything, through the exhaustion and fear and desperation, she'd managed to protect her son's heart. She'd managed to raise a kind, secure, happy child who felt loved even when they had almost nothing material to show for it. That night, Emma wrote in her journal, something she'd started doing in her rare free time. "Today, I realized that the coffee shop wasn't just about a job opportunity. It was about a reminder that who we are, our character, our kindness, our grace matters more than our circumstances." I could have been bitter about my situation. I could have been angry at Richard for his carelessness. I could have taught Daniel that the world is unfair and people with money don't care about people without it. But I chose differently, and that choice, more than luck or coincidence, is what changed our lives. I want to remember this. On days when things get hard again, because hard days will come, that's just life. I want to remember that kindness is never wasted. Grace is never pointless. The way we treat people, especially when we're struggling, defines us more than our struggles do. Richard gave me an opportunity, but I earned it by being someone worth investing in, and I became that person by making 1,000 small choices every day to be kind, to be dignified, to treat others well even when life wasn't treating me well. That's the lesson I want Daniel to carry with him. Not that rich people will save you if you're nice to them, but that being a person of character and kindness creates its own opportunities. That grace and dignity are strengths, not weaknesses. That how we face adversity matters as much as whether we overcome it. We're blessed now, but we were blessed then too, even when it didn't feel like it. Because we had love, we had each other, and we had our integrity. Those things, I'm learning, are worth more than any salary or job title. They're worth everything. Emma closed the journal and looked around her quiet apartment. Daniel was asleep, safe and warm. She had a job she loved, a future that looked bright, and a heart full of gratitude. She thought about Richard Montgomery, who turned an accidental coffee spill into a life-changing opportunity. She thought about his own story, sleeping in his car, struggling, being given a chance by someone who saw his potential. Grace begets grace. Kindness creates more kindness. The good we do ripples outward in ways we can't always see or measure. Emma would spend the rest of her life creating those ripples, just as someone had created them for her. Because that's what you do when you've been given a second chance. You don't just take it, you pass it forward. Friends, the story of Emma Hayes and Richard Montgomery teaches us timeless truths that our world desperately needs to remember. First, it teaches us that kindness costs nothing but can change everything. Emma had every right to be angry that morning in the coffee shop. She was exhausted, struggling, wearing a stained uniform that represented her daily battle to survive. Richard's carelessness had made her situation worse, but she chose grace over anger, and that single choice opened a door she couldn't have imagined. Second, it reminds us that true character is revealed in how we handle adversity. Anyone can be kind when life is easy. Anyone can be gracious when they're comfortable. But Emma showed who she truly was when she was at her lowest point, and what she showed was dignity, grace, and compassion. That's the person Richard saw. That's the person worth investing in. Third, it teaches us that we're always being watched, not by a judgmental God waiting to catch us in mistakes, but by a world that notices character. Our children watch us and learn from us. Strangers observe us and form opinions. And sometimes, someone with the power to change our lives sees us in our most vulnerable moment and makes a decision about who we are based on that moment. Fourth, it shows us that helping others isn't just about money. Richard didn't write Emma a check. He offered her an opportunity to earn her own success, to prove herself, to build something sustainable. The greatest gift we can give someone isn't a handout. It's a chance to succeed through their own effort and ability. Finally, it reminds us that grace creates grace. Richard helped Emma because someone once helped him. Emma is now helping others because Richard helped her. Each act of kindness creates ripples that spread outward, touching lives we'll never know about, creating good we'll never see. In our world today, it's easy to become cynical. It's easy to believe that good people finish last, that kindness is weakness, that looking out for yourself is the only way to survive. But Emma's story proves otherwise. Emma didn't get ahead by stepping on others. She didn't succeed by being cutthroat or selfish. She transformed her life by being exactly who she'd always been, a person of dignity, grace, and kindness, even when circumstances gave her every excuse to be bitter. If you're watching this and you're struggling right now, remember Emma. Remember that your character during hard times matters. Remember that kindness is never wasted. Remember that how you treat people, all people, regardless of their status, defines you more than your circumstances do. And if you're watching this from a place of comfort and success, remember Richard. Remember to see people, really see them. Remember that behind every tired worker, every struggling parent, every person serving you coffee or cleaning your office, there's a story. There's a human being deserving of dignity and respect. And remember that you have the power to change lives, not through grand gestures, but through simple recognition of worth in others. Emma Hayes taught us that grace under pressure is not weakness. It's the strongest thing a person can show. Daniel Hayes taught us that kindness is learned from watching those we love, and that even small gestures matter. Richard Montgomery taught us that true success isn't measured by what we accumulate, but by what we give back, by the doors we open for others. Together, their story teaches us something our world needs desperately to remember. We rise by lifting others. So today, I want to encourage you, be kind. Choose grace. Treat everyone with dignity, not because you'll get something in return, but because it's the right way to live. Your character in moments of adversity might just be the thing that changes your life, or changes someone else's. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe to this channel for more stories that remind us of the good that exists in our world and the difference each of us can make. And remember, the world doesn't need more perfect people. It needs more people who choose kindness when anger would be justified, who show grace under pressure, and who treat every human being with the dignity they deserve. Be that person. Be the one who creates ripples of good in this world, because you never know, your moment of grace might be someone else's miracle. Thank you for watching, and may you be blessed in all your endeavors.